Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, welcome. Test taking strategies, skills for success. Name is Scott Fetters, St. Augustine campus. Brooke, do you want to say hello?
Hi, everybody. I'm Brooke Busgeth. I'm the Student Success Advisor on the San Marcos campus. Cameron says,
And
don't sound so excited, Scott. I work with the students in the OT and PT programs. There might be some SLP students on here as well, but so that is me. And then Scott is on St. Augustine, and he's very excited to be here.
yeah, and so what can we expect from this presentation? This presentation is going to be a general overview. And we kind of broke it down what you can do before the exam, during the exam, and after. Um, it's going to be a framework, foundational framework. It's going to be pragmatic. This presentation will not be course or content specific for the most part. There's a few examples, I guess, that we get into, but this presentation, this resource, like any other resource in and of itself, is not going to be a magical answer to earning an A. It's just another piece of the puzzle. And it's not going to be a deep dive on study skills specifically. We're going to try and keep it to test taking strategies. So with that, first question. Which of these activities do you already use? Study groups, open lab, faculty office hours, tutoring or supplemental instruction. Avoid comparing yourself to others. Study guides, practice exams, studying same content or subject multiple times during the week. And then there's the other category. Right. What are some difficulties you encounter when taking tests? Anonymous word cloud. Go ahead and throw in the responses there. Getting them right. Okay. Several references to anxiety in there. Second guessing, triple guessing. What else we got? Taking too much time. We will address that a little bit later on. Keywords. Yeah. Time limit. Understanding the Castillo. The Castillo. I'm confused. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. Thank you for your candid responses. What are some difficulties you encounter when preparing for the tests beforehand? Cramming. We will cover that later. Time management, procrastination. overwhelmed, time. Wow, lots of responses here. Information overload. There's anxiety again. Yeah. Okay, once again, thank you for all of those responses. Famous quote, I knew the material, but I didn't do well on the test. And the official citation for this is all students since the beginning of time. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have felt this way or are going to feel this way. Hopefully after this presentation, will be a little of assistance to you. Now, these are tips 101. These are hopefully, at least some of these are kind of things you already know or things you're already kind of putting into practice, but we do have to put it here at the beginning of the presentation because every term we work with students where any number of these bullet pointed items are issues for folks in the first part of the first trimester. So try to arrive early. Be prepared for unexpected life circumstances, right? Make sure you read that entire question. Sometimes it can be tempting to kind of read 80% of it, kind of jump to the multiple choice options because you think you got it. But then you get a fair chunk of those types of questions incorrect. Reading all the options, if it's multiple choice, don't cram, which we'll cover a little bit later. And then, of course, try to practice some good sleep hygiene.
Okay, so this is a part of the presentation where I talk a little bit about forgetting and something called the forgetting curve, but this is for the students that are watching the recording. You have 3 passcodes that you have to turn in, and the first one is Katy Perry. Okay, so the forgetting curve. So I'm going to talk about what it is and why it's important to understand what it is. But this chart on the right is a visual representation of how your memory fades over time. And this German psychologist discovered that the memory of something weakens over time, but the biggest drop in your retention of that thing or learning that thing happens right after you learn it. So what does that mean? That means you need to keep reviewing that content, right? It's forgetting is a natural process. We understand that, but with the right tools at the graduate level program, there's things you can do to prevent it from happening so quickly and prevent it from happening to where you're not doing well on a test or when you get to the licensure exam where you can't remember anything, right? So again, the biggest drop in retaining information occurs right after it's introduced. And then again, it's a natural part of the process of learning things, but what can you do? What does this mean for you? So the implications of this for college students is obvious. A day or two after attending class or reading a chapter or article, students will have forgotten approximately 75% of what was learned. And then moreover, most of that forgetting happens within the first hour. So you should plan to review information consistently leading up to and after the exam. We'll talk about that a little bit. And like we said, and I said this at orientation too, is cramming does not work, okay? So how do you combat the forgetting curve? So if you haven't figured it out already, there's active recall methods you can use. You could do distributed practice, study guides, practice exams. These are all evidence-based strategies that work together to combat the forgetting curve, okay? You can use them in different ways. For example, active recall is when you're retrieving information from memory using flashcards, brain dumps, self-quizzing, etc. It is the most powerful way for you to strengthen long-term retention. And I'll talk about different strategies in the next slide for utilizing active recall. There's also something called distributed practice. You probably remember talking a little bit about this at orientation, but it's where you space your study session out over days and weeks. So typically, instead of studying, for example, IFS for 5 hours in one day, you would study it for an hour a day for 5 days. Okay, that's just a watered down example of that. This also means visiting a subject multiple times throughout the week instead of only studying a course or topic on Mondays, try studying it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or every day, depending on, you know, the content that you're trying to understand, how much information there is you're trying to understand. So that's distributed practice. Study guides. So this is a way for you to organize key concepts and themes in a way that works for you. Okay, it's going to be different for everybody. It's going to reduce cognitive load for you. It's going to convert the study side sections into recall type questions. So that's how you can use study guides to your advantage. If you're given a study guide by faculty, it's probably not going to be the most detailed thing. So you're going to take that and add material to it, add more information to it. I think it's IFS that have like the bulleted things you need to know for each unit. That's not going to get you very far. So you need to take that and add things to it, whether it be by yourself, with a partner in a study group. It's just using that as a guide to get you started so you can dive a little bit deeper. And then we have practice exams where you simulate real testing conditions. So you kind of give yourself, you know, say you give yourself 10 questions and you give yourself 10 minutes to answer those questions, right? So you're going to simulate what it's going to actually be like when you sit for the exam. It will help you identify weak areas, and it will reinforce learning under pressure. You can develop those individually, you can develop them with a group, but these are all ways that will help you to retain information long term, okay? And then active recall is probably something you might not have used in undergrad, right? So now it's very important to start utilizing and understanding how to utilize that at the graduate level when you're preparing for a test. And this is basically retrieving information from memory without looking at the source. So without looking at your notes, your study guides, your lectures, rather than passively looking at the content. So a lot of my term one students, when I meet with them, they say, oh, I just go back to my lecture slides and I highlight. Okay, that's passive learning, right? What do you do with that information you're highlighting it? Are you summarizing it in your own words? Are you trying to remember what you highlighted, put it in your own words, and then go back and reference if needed? So additional ways you can use active recall. So flashcards, but are you using them productively? So if you tell me, if you meet with me and you say you're using flashcards, I'll ask you, are you using them productively? And I'll talk about what that looks like in a second. Simply summarizing material in your own words without looking at your notes. That's a way to do active recall. There's also a technique that a lot of my faculty prefer their students use, and that's teaching the information to someone else. It's called the Feynman technique. I think that's how you say it. And then blurting or brain dumping, it's literally where you write down everything you recall about a specific topic on a sheet of paper, give yourself 3 minutes to write everything down that you can think of for that topic, and that's your review. That's your active recall. That's usually something I recommend you do like in between classes, on your lunch break or something. These things don't have to take a lot of your time, okay? It's just seeing what you know right there in the moment. And then if you don't know something, or if you're not strong in a certain subject or content, that's when you would go back and reference your notes. And then there's something called the bucket method. This is something someone brought up to me last term that they had utilized. And it's similar to blurting and brain dumping, where you write down everything you recall and then sort it into 3 buckets. Those 3 buckets include what you know well, what you kind of know, and what you don't know yet. You can also use this method in to coincide with the flashcards. So you're going through your flashcards, you have some that you know really well, those go in one bucket. You have some that you kind of know, those go in another bucket, and then the ones you really need to work on, those go in a separate bucket. And then another way to active recall when you're listening to lectures online or watching videos is to pause every once in a while and then write down and summarize what you just saw on the video or what you just heard in the lecture. So those are all ways you can do active recall that will help you in the long run. And then again, before the exam, this will also help with the forgetting curve, combating it. It also is part of active recall to some extent, but a lot of questions we get is how do you organize for dense courses? So I'm thinking like IFS, human function, conditions. I don't know SLP courses because I don't work for those students, but any course where you have multiple subjects being taught at one time, okay? That'd be an example where you could utilize these types of organizations. So I'm going to talk about chunking and consolidation. If you are part of the San Marcos program, you've probably heard this from faculty because they use it for, they suggest it for IFS. But basically that's where you break down large pieces of information into smaller manageable chunks. Examples include organizing notes by chapter, topic, subtopic, rather than organizing them linearly. Organize information based on meaning patterns or existing knowledge of the information. So an example for anatomy. So read in the text the names, attachments, and innervations of 10 muscles. Write what you just read. If needed, you can also draw the structures, rewrite and draw the information again, and then consolidate all the information and draw right from memory a final time. And then move on to the next chunk of the next 10 muscles. Okay, so you keep reviewing it until you get really good at it, and then you add, another 10 muscles. So that's an example of chunking for anatomy. Another example is you could utilize chunking by region of the body instead of system by system. Each region would be one study block for you. So you would master one system, and then you'd move on to the next, and then you just keep adding to it. You could also chunk within each region by bones, muscles, and nerves, example in that region, and then chunk a second time by movement, condition, palpation, etc. in that region. So those are different examples for how you can utilize chunking for anatomy. And then another method you could use for organizing for dense courses is mind or concept mapping. And this is always a visually appealing way to organize, especially for students that are visual learners. It's going to show connections. It's going to activate your visual memory. It's going to encourage synthesis, so you'll be able to see connections. It's going to reveal gaps. And then it will give you an overview of the topic, right? You'll be able to see everything pertaining to that main idea or that subject on one page. And then it encourages you to take fewer notes because you have a smaller space to work with. And I'll show you what that looks like on the next couple of slides so you can see what I'm talking about there. What does it look like? So for example, you'd put the course or unit in the center, and then you'd branch out into subtopics and then sub-branches for the additional details. You can use different colors or symbols to distinguish between theories, examples, case studies. If you're mapping out a chapter you're reading, you can see how those concepts relate before you read more deeply. And then again, you could use it to turn a dense lecture into a concept map that you can review leading up to the exam. So you could use it as a study guide as well. So this is, again, a watered down template of a concept map. And you probably saw this in language arts in high school when you're trying to set up and write a paper, but you would put the main idea or unit topic here, and then the subtopics on the sides, and then you would break that further down. Again, it's a smaller space to use, but that means you'll just have to be more concise with your notes and making sure you're only writing the important pieces down for each of these. And then I took it a bit further. This is an example from years ago from a conditions course, so it's not the current conditions course, but I was interested in learning about hoarding disorder, and so I took hoarding disorder was the main topic, and then I defined and described, what it is, and then these are my 3 main points from that. And then I would go further with the diagnosis, signs and symptoms, and things like that. So it's more visually appealing, and it will help you see connections to the content. Again, this is just another way to organize for denser courses. Okay, so study guides. Where do I start? So let's say you have a course that's really troublesome to you, but there's no study guide. Faculty do not provide a study guide. Look at the unit objectives. Turn those into questions. I know you guys don't look at the unit objectives. No one ever looks at the unit objectives, but they're there to guide you because they're telling you what you're going to know by the end of the course or the end of the unit. So use those as a tool. They're simple statements. They're very broad statements, but turn those into questions and just literally write as much as you know as far as answering that question. If you do the reading assignments, a lot of the texts have objectives listed. Connect those objectives in the text to the learning objectives for that unit, right? Turn those into questions. Then you have more questions for your study guide. There is benefit in creating your own versus using someone else's. So if you're working in a group and another student has created one, add to it. If you're in a class where faculty have provided a study guide, be sure to add to it. Faculty provided study guide is a good place to start, but again, you should be diving deeper. And I think that's the expectation for faculty that do provide study guides, that you'll dive a little bit deeper. Peer provided study guide. Creating your own study guide is a form of study. It'll help you retain the information versus being given the information. So again, in both instances, you're expected to take the study guide and just add to it. and Scott will talk a little bit more about using this part, but pictures, diagrams, or draw your own. Don't just rely on words. And this is a quote from, I think, from a student who used to be a tutor. Study guides for a course like anatomy should consist of more than just words, because anatomy isn't words. It's something physical that can be seen with pictures and diagrams and on our own bodies. If you're developing a study guide and you still have questions, reach out to your faculty, go to faculty office hours, have them review your study guide to tell you if you're on the right track, right? So that is one benefit of attending faculty office hours. We'll talk more about that as well. And then Scott is going to talk about some additional resources for developing study guides.
So the study guides, we're going to show you some examples in a little bit, but the slide deck that will be loaded into the portal will have these links in here. So there's an anatomy library guide, and then there's a video atlas of human anatomy if you wanted to take a look at it. There's also some other links towards the end of this slide deck that will have additional kind of additional resources or input or examples of how you can contribute to your study guides in a meaningful way. But let's go ahead and take a look at a few examples. So these were actually taken from one of our veteran tutors a while back. And we're going to stick with the anatomy side of things. So you can see the use of color coding, which Brooke kind of mentioned previously. Blue for veins, yellow, orange for nerves. And then the choice or the decision to use black for general info. So this is just kind of one example. I mean, your study guides are, going to be 45 pages or 30 pages or whatever. This is just kind of one example of a diagram to how you can kind of incorporate that. And then the next slide is going to show you a different kind of version of that. So notice, again, the color coding, but also incorporating the diagrams, scanning those into your study guide. So this is just kind of a small example. And again, this is actually the tutor that provided us these examples was the same tutor that provided the quote on the slide from, or the quote from a couple slides ago. So let's move on to the next slide. AI. A lot of talk about AI the past few terms. If you don't know, there is an AI committee at the university. They are working on standard policy surrounding the use of AI. Updates whenever they come. You'll be notified about them, but until the policy is announced, or policies in the coming terms, the default is to confirm with the faculty what is the expectation, because what it is right now pretty much is some faculty will encourage the use of AI in certain areas for certain things, others will not. So just default to your faculty to figure out what the expectation is for you. And then that last kind of bullet point, creating a study guide is a form of study itself. So yeah, you could use AI and create a 30-page study guide in a matter of seconds. But we hear a lot from students that the actual creation of it and putting in the time, there are some students that swear they have to handwrite things. They have to handwrite their notes, or they have to handwrite everything in a study guide as opposed to typing it. That helps them retain the information. So when you're creating the study guide, yeah, it's going to be time consuming, but you're also studying the information and you're going to be able to retain it much better than a 10-second AI generated study guide. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about practical exams. So utilize them early. We hear all the time by the end of the first trimester, students saying, I wish I would have utilized open lab time earlier. Anything you can do to replicate the test environment is what you should be doing. Record yourself, watch it back. There is going to be some stage fright. The record yourself thing is interesting. Anybody out there that has like a hobby of playing a musical instrument will tell you when you're doing something, when you're playing that instrument, you think it sounds a certain way, but when you listen to the recording of it, it sounds very different than the way you thought. And it's kind of the same concept here. So recording yourself, there is some merit to it, to kind of account for the things that you may not catch while you're doing it on your own. Be mindful of the exam guidelines or restrictions, talking through it, verbalizing things. Sometimes that gets overlooked, and that's not just for labs or practicals, but some people, when they're reviewing their notes or something, will also verbally talk through things. You do want to be aware of complacency. You want to eliminate bias. So if you're working with the same 2 or 3 people for the entire trimester, some bias is going to creep in there. Somebody's going to move their arm before somebody says something, or you're going to be very familiar with everybody's tendencies, right? So you want to do things to keep yourself on your toes, because when it's game day, you're not going to have the luxury of working with those same 2 or 3 people. So try to mix things up, practice with different people. I did have a faculty member mention this next point. Make sure you're using that grading rubric. Make sure that when you're practicing things from a practical exam standpoint, that you are working right off that rubric, because that's what they're going to use to evaluate you. Plan ahead. This is typically not the type of thing where you can just kind of cram in a few hours a day before and get much benefit from it. So you're going to want to map that out. I think one of the previous sessions was time management and all that stuff. So, and yeah, try to have a grader, a patient, and obviously a student for each practice session. Okay. Before the exam still, organization and calendars. I think I might have mentioned this in the last presentation for time management, but out of sight, out of mind. If you don't have a calendar, get one. I do not recommend that flip folder calendar because it's only going to show you a week at a time. The popular version, I think, is putting a wall-mounted dry erase board next to your workstation and mapping out 3 or 4 weeks at a time. Concept being, it's always there, right? So if the calendar is out of sight, it will be out of mind to a certain extent. And not just knowing what's coming up this week is not going to be good enough. You're going to have to map things out further than that. Group work. Faculty member gave us this quote: "It's fine if you create your own practice test questions, but what if they're bad questions?" So it's fine if you want to do a lot of self-study, but you're going to have to incorporate some percentage of group work in your baseline study routines if you want to be successful in these programs. And one of the benefits of working with a group is practice exams, practice quizzes. So When you're doing your group work, make sure the same person is not always answering first. There's no benefit if it's being monopolized by one person. Task people. Sometimes groups will do a rotation. In one of the word clouds, there were several people that talked about running out of time. You should be making sure that your mini exam has the same time ratio as the real exam. So if your quote unquote real exam has 60 questions on it, and just hypothetically you have 1 hour to do that exam, that's one question per minute. So in my study group, maybe there's 4 people and we each come up with 5 practice test questions. So we have a 20-question mini exam. So of course, we're only going to have a 20-minute time limit because we want to replicate that testing environment. So you absolutely should be timing these practice run-throughs or these practice exams. Another thing with group work, sharing the responsibility of making sure your agenda items are getting met each week. So you can do that by rotating leaders. If you're meeting once a week for 3 hours at a time, take the first 15 or 20 minutes and have a group leader lay out the agenda, recap what was last week. Maybe that group leader is going to teach everybody Unit 3 or whatever. Brooke had mentioned something in a previous slide about you should be able to teach this information to your peers. This is a great way to do it. Back to the scheduling, cumulative exams. And if you don't know which exams are going to be cumulative, you're going to want to know. That can be essential to figuring out, mapping out what I call your runway, really. For a cumulative exam, you're going to need more time to prepare for it, right? Because you're going to be responsible for content from week 2, the same as week 13. And you're going to have to go through everything basically for the trimester. And again, Brooke mentioned this on a previous slide, but in undergrad, if you could get away with preparing for an exam in 1 week, you can expect to have to extend that runway further for a lot of these exams and a lot of these courses that you're going to encounter. That's the one thing that you do have control over, is how soon you start preparing for these exams. It may feel a little weird at first if you're, preparing for an exam 2.5 weeks out, because you're like, hey, I've got quizzes, I've got some other projects in these other courses. Why do I have to start early? I can do this later. I can do it next week. And in some of these cases, you won't be able to do it next week. And so you're going to have to juggle multiple things for most of you at a level that you haven't had to previously do, like let's say in a traditional undergrad program. We also hear this from faculty quite a bit. It's not good enough to just know the material. You have to understand the applications of the content. And they are going to ask you to do that on these exams. So if you do approach the content here in the first term or two from a rote memorization standpoint, it will come back and bite you later. So this isn't something that happens overnight, of course, but as you're ingraining the content and the material, you're going to have to understand the applications of it, and they're going to reflect that in the types of questions that they ask. And you're really going to start to see it once you start working your way into other terms, because all of this content is going to intertwine, and you're going to have to start integrating your knowledge and your information and your understanding of things from previous terms and other classes. And it may happen in the same trimester, it could happen in a previous trimester, but you'll start to see that as you start to move through. Some of you may already have taken advantage of the iLearn videos. There's going to be a link to that later on at the end of the presentation, but there's all kinds of pre-recorded videos that are loaded on that site. There should be a quick link on your MyUSA page on the left-hand side that just says iLearn videos or something like that. But academic skills, scholarly skills, healthcare leadership. Yeah, so we'll show that to you at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please.
This is me, right? No.
I believe so. We can tag team on it. Yeah.
Okay. So to give the second passcode for those watching the recording, the second one is Van Halen. Okay, I think this is, oh, okay. So when you're actually sitting for the exam and it's multiple choice exam, for example, obviously the key is to read the entire question and identify multiple keywords before looking at the answer choices. If you don't identify all keywords, it could mislead you, and don't get too into the weeds or overthink each component of the question. Highlight the most important pieces before moving on to answering the question. Being sure to manage your time. Like Scott was saying, when you develop practice exams, the ratio should fit what the actual exam is going to feel like. So simulate exam time constraints when developing your practice exams. For example, if the exam is 60 questions per hour, so 1 question per minute, that practice exam could be 30 questions for a mini exam. That should be about 30 minutes. Use extra time to check your work, but don't overanalyze or change your answers unnecessarily. You should only be changing your answers if you can justify the change. For example, you must read the question the first time you answered it, and then trust your gut if you are so wanting to change the answer. Anything else for that one, Scott, during the exam?
No, I guess, in the word cloud, again, previously, a lot of people did put changing your answer. And so, yeah, there is a difference between using extra time to go back and check your work versus talking yourself out of what was most likely a correct answer or a correct educated guess. So generally we do recommend trust your gut after you objectively read the question, making sure you're identifying all those keywords. They're going to try and trick you. A question could have 4 important keywords, but you're really zeroing in on only 3 of them, and that's going to lead you down a different path, right? Another thing, I can't remember if we had this on a slide later, but I'll just say it now. If it is a multiple choice exam, some folks will make sure that they read the question in its entirety and go through it, and then try to answer the question before they even look at the options. So that can be a way to kind of reaffirm or affirm what you most likely already know, right? So if you read the question like 90% and then jump to those options, probably not the best thing to do. Go ahead and make sure you read that question and understand it, digest it. Go ahead and try and answer it before you see those options, and that might be beneficial. I know some students will also kind of test that out, like on quizzes first before they move over to exams. So those are the only other things I think I would add on that. Yeah, there we go, right?
Yeah, so yeah, just like Scott was saying, try to answer the question in your own words before looking at the choices. I always tell my students to just cover the screen where the choices are and just focus on the question and see if they can answer it in their own words. Don't choose an answer because it's factually true, okay? Because it could be factually true, but it might not answer the question that's being asked. So make sure you're selecting the right answer based on that, not trying to rush through it. If you have a case study exam, so you have a case that you're reading and then you have to answer questions about it later, read the case multiple times before you even go to the questions. I even have a faculty for our IFS course, and she teaches clinical neuroscience, or I believe. She always recommends for the case exams to literally read it line by line. Okay, so you're going to slow down when you're reading it, when you're doing it line by line. Another thing you could do is read the case materials, read the questions, read the case materials again, and then you can pick up any keywords from both the questions and the case materials if you do it that way. Another thing with multiple choice exams that I recommend to students is, if you're still stuck on it, you've tried, you've covered up the answer choices, you've tried answering it in your own words, you've read the question several times. You could also read the question, read answer choice A, read the question again, read answer choice B, and you're just going one at a time. That can also help kind of clarify things if you're just reading everything kind of line by line in that way. So that's another strategy you could use. Obviously, that's going to take a little bit more time, and you would probably utilize that when you're still stuck on the question, but you've moved past to other questions, and now you're just kind of reviewing your answers. So those are a couple things you can do with multiple choice and case study exams. Before that, though, the last keyword for those watching the recording is Snoop Dogg. And Scott, I think this is yours.
Okay. So we've talked about before the exam and during the exam. One thing that kind of gets or tends to get overlooked is what you can do after the exam. So objective analysis, was your score what you thought it would be? Being honest with yourself about that. And then no matter what the score is, you do have to own it. I'm not saying you can't be disappointed with a score or surprised by a score, but you're going to have to pivot pretty quickly and own the score and do some of these things after the exam analysis type thing, because you've got something else coming up tomorrow, right? So try to avoid the black-white thinking. It's one exam in one course in one trimester of many, 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 many trimesters, okay? So usually one exam is not going to make or break something. I do something sometimes which is called a zoom out exercise. So right now you guys are in first term, so you know why you're in these programs, you know all the sacrifices that you've made. But let's say you're in term 3 or 4, there's a little burnout that sets in and you're kind of living day to day, quiz to quiz, exam to exam, week to week. It can be kind of frustrating, and you can kind of have blinders on, right? So if you get to that point, go ahead and just take a breath, step back, zoom out, and remind yourself of why you started this journey. I promise you, most of you a year from now are going to look back in your first term, and for a lot of you, it's going to seem like it was, 5 years ago. There's going to be so much going on, and you guys only get a few weeks off during the trimesters. There's a lot of stuff that you guys are responsible for. So sometimes you do want to zoom out, remind yourself why you made these commitments, own the score, own the process, make a pivot and move forward. I know it's easier said than done, but try not to compare yourself to others. I'm not saying competition is bad. I think it can actually be pretty healthy. But the important thing is that that's not your main motivation. That's not your knee-jerk reaction after you get your scores, is to compare, everything to everybody and all that. The important thing is, what are your standards? Okay, what are you looking to get on this quiz or this exam? What kind of grade are you looking to get in the course? And I understand everybody's going to say, well, I want to get an A in the course, and that's fine. That's fine if that's your standard. But, for a lot of folks, getting a B in a certain course that has content area that maybe you're not too comfortable with can be perfectly acceptable. So establish what your standards are. And then we talk so much, I think, just in general in academia about success. mean, our department is named student success, student success advisors. That's our role. But what's your definition of failure, right? So, I mean, if, what is unacceptable? And that's, not just maybe for a score, but maybe the grade in the course, or maybe could be the exam preparation. It could be what you're doing with your notes or your study guides. Again, I use the word a lot, but pivots. So there, you're so busy in this first trimester because you're responsible for getting good grades and all this is new and everything, but you're also responsible for objectively analyzing all this stuff and making the pivots and the adjustments to, okay, I need to do something different here with my note taking, or I do need to extend my runway further in this course, or I need to utilize other resources that I haven't used before. So, you know, what is the definition of failure? What is the pivot, and how are you going to address that essentially? Faculty office hours, speaking of resources, very underutilized. So your faculty have to make themselves available to you. Usually it's before or after an exam where a lot of students will find the most benefit from that. It's not something you need to do every other week, but you probably should sprinkle in a few faculty office hours from a few courses throughout each term. I know some students will submit their practice test questions to the faculty and get feedback on them. Some students will submit 20 pages of a study guide ahead of a faculty office hour meeting and then review it with their lead faculty. So this is something to keep in mind for some of you, maybe a lot of you. You never had to really incorporate this in previous programs, undergrad, whatever. But it is something that you should be incorporating to some extent each trimester, in my opinion. Brooke, do you have any other words about faculty office hours?
Just that they're your first line of defense for the content, right? So they're the ones that can better explain it so you can understand it. They're the ones that can review the exam with you and see where you made a misstep. Unlike undergrad, where it might have been a little scary to meet with faculty, they look at you as colleagues in training, right? So they're there to help you. So definitely, like Scott said, this is definitely underutilized, especially for term one for whatever reason. They're there to help you. So make that, if you're struggling, make that a priority. Even if you're not struggling, make it a priority to meet with faculty. But I think the key also is to go in there prepared, not just going in there and say, hey, what's going to be on this next exam? Because then they're going to tell you, you need to figure that out. Or, I just talked about this today. Like, what were you doing? Go in there with questions, right? Go in there with solid questions. Go in there with your study guide, like Scott was mentioning. Go in there prepared, basically. But definitely it's underutilized for term one. It's highly recommended you start utilizing that if you have not done so already. And this one is tips from faculty. Tips from faculty. If you understand the material, again, you should be able to teach it to someone else. Engage in the material in multiple modalities. Don't just rely on the learning style or method that you're used to utilizing, right? Scott talked significantly about applying the information versus just remembering, like rote memorization. In order to apply it, you're going to have to use everything, like reading, writing, drawing the information. Certain topics may be best understood visually. Oops, sorry. Others, auditory methods, and some may require drawing or schematic representation. That is a quote from one of my faculty members. Study the material you are least comfortable with the most. However, that does not mean that you sacrifice a 2-credit course for a 6-credit course, right? Because that 2-credit course will sneak up on you. You still need to stay up to date with that content and that material as well. But if it's content you're not comfortable with, study it more often. Example, we talk about anatomy all the time. Try studying it a little each day, not just right before the exam. Review notes after class, rewrite them if you have to. We know you're like struggling to write down everything that's being said, so why not go back after the fact and clean up what you've written down, right? Reflect on your notes, summarize them. Ideally, you should be summarizing them before you go to bed. Talked about the forgetting curve, and you typically forget everything within minutes of learning it. So ideally, reviewing the content a little bit before you go to bed is ideal. Again, utilize faculty office hours early on. Tips from students. Utilize group study effectively. It should be proactive and not reactive. So it's not to say you can't go into a group session and ask questions about content that was already presented on, but you should also be spending that time to prepare for upcoming lab or lecture. Do independent study before you go to a group session. A lot of students I meet with are intimidated by the group sessions because sometimes the students know a little bit more or are able to unpack the information a little bit better than they are, right? Maybe they have a better background in anatomy than some other students. So don't be intimidated by it. Do some studying before you go to the group session, and then you have some content and some questions you can add to the group session. But you should not solely rely on the group session, and you should not solely rely on independent study. Review your notes as soon as you can after class, rewrite them if you need to. Just like I said with faculty, they recommend cleaning up those notes, reflecting on them consistently, reviewing them, summarizing them so that you understand and retain them. Utilize tutoring effectively. I know for IFS we have the supplemental instruction, so obviously utilize that for IFS. If you're a PT student, OT students, SLP, utilize tutoring. It is proactive versus reactive. Again, we're going to talk about this all the time. Don't cram for exams. Give yourself time to relax the night before, and you should not begin studying for the exam the night before the exam. Seek help. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick note about the tutoring. So this question actually came up today. How do you sign up for tutoring? There was an email that went out to everybody a couple weeks ago that had the link in there. But you can also go to the Student Services tab in the portal and the tutoring submenu option. And there you can find the link there as well. The other thing is keep open lines of communication with your tutor. So usually a few times each term, I get a question about, hey, my tutor is doing this, or I'm not getting a lot out of the session because of this or that, or most of the people in my group want this. And my first question is always going to be, did you talk to the tutor? Right? So they should be receptive to feedback. They have a lot of kind of tools in their toolkit. Most of those sessions are going to be pretty engaging and what have you. But if you want more of something, if you want less of something, if you want something new kind of introduced into those sessions, just go ahead and reach out. If you don't feel comfortable mentioning it in the session or like at the end of the session, just go ahead and shoot them an email and just say, hey, just talking to other folks, we were thinking about this. What do you think? Whatever. Cool? Cool.
Okay, and then I talked about seeking help early on. Talk to your professors early, like we said, going to office hours when you need to. And then tips from students. It's difficult to study for material in courses when there's an exam for another course coming up. If you study a little bit each day, you won't get behind on studying. Use the lecture slides and course syllabus to narrow your studying because there's too much going on to learn it all. That's again where the objectives come in, because you need to kind of zoom in on what you're supposed to be learning, right? And that's where objectives, the course syllabus, and all that comes in. I was studying with a group before I was able to teach someone the information. I was being taught more than I was searching and coming up with answers on my own. I assumed because I conceptually got the information that I was going to be able to access the information on the exam. However, it is important to be able to identify why the wrong answers are wrong. I think that's what that was supposed to say. Remind yourself you are working towards being a professional. You need to work every single day. And then the example the student gave was professional athletes don't go to championships with just practicing 3 days before the game. They practice every day. And also tell them, and this is a suggestion to new students, to keep reminding themselves that they're gonna need this information every single day in their future clinics. So to really attempt to understand it now. Okay, so those are tips from students. Accommodations. So we do know some students require accommodation for exams. If you anticipate needing accommodations, it's important that you initiate the application process as early as possible. Accommodations are not retroactive, and early planning ensures the appropriate support is in place well in advance before the exam. If you need accommodations, you can find more information under student services and accommodations on your student portal. And it can take up to 2 weeks for approval. So reach out if you feel you need those now for upcoming exams. Okay, so which of these strategies that we discussed did you find helpful and or do you plan to use to support your academic success? And you should have the option to select more than one. And I think we already bypassed our initial question for at the beginning with the faculty office hours. So that's a good sign. Hopefully you guys start utilizing those if you have not done so already. And then obviously, and we didn't kill this dead horse like we usually do, Scott, but we are here for you also, right? We're not content experts, but we have education backgrounds. We can let, you know, find what strategies work for you. So we had a lot of information on active recall and strategies there. I don't like flashcards. There's probably people on this call that don't like flashcards. Meet with your SSA and determine what kind of active recall would work for you. Okay, Scott.
Yeah, your SSA, your respective SSAs are going to be very good at holding up an objective mirror to what you're going through, what your study routines are thus far, and help you identify what those pivots need to be or those tweaks and edits to where you want to get to your baseline study routine. I think I might have said this in the last session, but it's not unusual for it to take an entire trimester before you really start to get to a baseline study routine. So there's going to be some trial and error. So you can drop a meeting in with your SSA to kind of walk through that, and they can assist you with that. And for everybody, you should be able to get access to their calendars through the auto signature, the link in their auto signatures of any of their emails. So feel free to do that if you feel the need.
I'm just hopping in the chat really quick. There's some students that signed up for tutoring super early on. And if you haven't heard anything from a tutor, just reach out to your SSA because the SSAs do manage the tutor assignments. So if you sign up during week 1, haven't heard from any tutors yet, reach out to your local SSA. Okay. Are there other strategies you would recommend that we did not present tonight? Do you have anything that you would recommend to other students?
I would recommend listening to Snoop Dogg. I don't know. Okay.
We didn't get crying on this one.
Well,
Usually
we
get
didn't,
crying.
but Brooke,
Wait, what
we
did I
got
miss?
we got Snoop Dogg. Snoop
Okay,
Dogg's
that's
on there.
good. Yeah, that might help. I think he has like an affirmations thing. So
Somebody also put
yes,
classical
yeah.
music, which is not to be confused with Snoop Dogg, but let's see, YouTube, taking
Somebody
breaks,
put,
good sleep.
oh, there's that. Somebody put crying. Somebody put ChatGPT.
Lock in, bro. Okay.
Yeah, if you can explain the content to your spouse who knows nothing about the content, and then she can like answer any questions or ask questions about the content. That's a good sign if you're able to teach it to someone. No
Somebody
Taylor
put mint
Swift.
gum.
Yeah.
Mint gum is going to be a magical A to every exam that you take. And make sure you chew it really loudly during the exam.
Yeah. Alrighty. Okay. Are there other strategies you would like to know more about? So this is something you can come to your SSA. Like I want to.
No.
I think everybody's ready to go, Scott. Okay. No, please. Someone's like, please, God, no more. Please, God, just stop. Okay.
Brooke and Scott, you've given us way too much information. We just want to go to we just
Yeah,
want to go to Taco Bell and
we
go to
have stuff to
bed.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to know more about any of these strategies or something specific, like someone put their style of learning, definitely reach out to your SSA and we can unpack those things for you.
Snoop Dogg affirmations.
Yep. And we know you guys are exhausted. Okay. Who chooses the passcode? Scott, that came up. This term it was Scott that chose the passcodes.
Well, no. We tag teamed on this before. We use the same passcodes this go around as we
Yeah,
did
but I don't
last
remember
term.
how we developed them last time.
Well, I know I chose Van Halen. I'll take that one.
But I know
Is
I
it?
did not choose Katy Perry. I don't know where that one came from. I don't know.
I
But
don't think
not a
I
fan
did
of Katy
either.
Perry. But anyway.
Not a fan.
I think we were just throwing a loop in there. Okay.
Casino background noise.
All right. Okay, so we know you guys are ready to get off this meeting, but just want to remind you of academic support that is available to you. Tutoring, you can sign up under academic support. Supplemental instruction is only available for DPT IFS students. Definitely recommend signing up for that. And then student wellness page for additional resources. If you do cry a lot, maybe
A
you
lot of
should
sleep
visit the
hygiene
student
comments.
sleep
A lot of sleep
hygiene.
hygiene
Yeah,
comments. The student
yeah,
wellness portal, it really has been built out a lot over the past
yeah.
year. There's a lot of stuff in there.
And we tease about like, the emotional reactions to the program, but that's where we come in. We can help you unpack what's working, what's not working, why you're crying, why you're not crying, like all these things. So we can reach out, we can refer you to student wellness to help with those things as well. So we're all here to support you. And then, like Scott was saying, additional academic support includes the iLearn. We do have some things very specific to OT program. These slides are available. They'll be available when Hideki uploads this presentation to the portal with exam strategies specific to OT, and then SLP recommended practice exam preparation guides are available also. There's some links there for that. And then, yep, that's it. Any questions?
If you have any questions, you can, I guess with this number of people, probably put them in the chat. If it is of a personal nature or something, we would just recommend you reach out directly to your respective SSA just for, privacy and all that stuff. Otherwise, you guys I mean, we'll hang on the call here, but thanks for hanging with us. We went over a little bit. Appreciate it. Free to go. Have a good night, and we'll hang on the call.